Welcome, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jacob Siegel, JLEN's Director of Engagement, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Jewish Impact Investing Summit. Today is the second and final day of the summit. If you missed any of the sessions from yesterday, we will be posting the videos soon on JLEN's website. This session will explore the global responsible investing arena and provide an update on JLEN's advocacy on behalf of Jewish communal concerns. A few housekeeping items. The speaker biographies, session descriptions, and agenda are available on JLEN's website, jlensnetwork.org. We will be recording the summit in order to be able to share this content in the future. If you have a question you would like to ask during any of the sessions, please type it into the Q&A box in Zoom. And everything on today's summit is for educational purposes and is not to be construed as investment advice. So let's dive in. The global responsible investing arena has exploded in popularity and in influence over the past several years. It now represents over 25% of all professionally managed assets globally. That's over $30 trillion. Responsible investing is an exciting opportunity to bring Jewish values and ancient Jewish wisdom to bear on an incredibly modern and relevant field. That's what excites me as a rabbi every day in my work at JLENS. It is an arena where young people are engaged. People of my demographic, over 80% of us believe that our investments should align with and further our values. It is an arena founded by faith groups several decades ago where there's a tremendous opportunity for multi-faith collaboration. And most importantly, it is an arena where key Jewish communal concerns, including religious intolerance, hate speech, anti-Semitism, and the Boycott, Divest, Sanction campaign against Israel are all regularly at play. JLENS serves as a bridge between the Jewish community and the global responsible investing arena and advances Jewish leadership in this influential forum. I'd now like to introduce my colleagues, Rachel Cohen and Rabbi Josh Ratner. Rachel oversees JLEN's Jewish values-aligned research on corporate research and rankings on issues of concern to the Jewish community. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi Siegel.
So, Rachel, JLENS was founded a few years ago to work with Jewish institutions, to be a resource to the Jewish community on responsible investing. What did your initial conversations with Jewish institutions look like? What questions were they asking? What were they struggling with? And what did JLENS do in response?
Absolutely. And good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so to answer your question, initially, we were having a lot of conversations with Jewish institutions around how do you define Jewish values? What are the returns going to be to invest with our values? Really, there were a lot of obstacles and we found institutions were spinning their wheels. So JLENS ended up creating its own investment strategy.
And can you say more about that? What did it look like to create a Jewish impact investing strategy?
Right. Well, we wanted to create something concrete. And given my ESG, environmental social governance ratings background, our focus became quite clear. And that is to provide a unique strategy guided by Jewish values. So my work pivoted to methodology development based really on consultations with Jewish professionals and institutions of all streams, our annual stakeholder survey that many people here have taken, and translation of traditional text-based values into modern Jewish investment criteria.
Great. And can you give us a 30-second high-level overview of the Jewish advocacy strategy and what it does?
Sure, 30 seconds. JLENS created the Jewish advocacy strategy in 2015 to give the Jewish community representation in the responsible investing arena. The strategy pools Jewish institutional capital and invests in 300 of the largest US corporations. Now, we build long-term advocacy relationships with each of these companies, as well as with other responsible investors. So investors in the JLENS strategy include nearly 24 Jewish federations, Jewish community foundations, national organizations, private foundations, and individuals.
Can you say more about that advocacy piece and that representation piece? What was JLENS noticing about the need for Jewish representation in the responsible investing arena?
Well, in this arena, other faiths have really represented their values for decades. JLens recognized the need to have a clear voice representing mainstream Jewish concerns. Having a seat at this table requires clearly a pool of capital invested with a defined Jewish values-based lens and a long-term timeline to enable advocacy relationships, which are really crucial. There has been no Jewish communal representative claiming a seat at this influential table in the responsible investing arena really until JLens.
Yeah, and beyond even claiming a seat at the table, Rachel, I'd add that in the field, the responsible investing field was founded by Christian organizations decades ago, and much of the field, including the research backing it up, still defaults to that Christian values lens. So the question of how to bring Jewish values into an investment portfolio is a really interesting one. So what are the core Jewish values that drive JLens' work?
Yeah, that's right, Rabbi Siegel. To create this strategy, we really needed to start with defining the Jewish lens, really to differentiate what you just mentioned from the typical sin stocks and pure negative screening approach. JLens' approach to responsible investing is guided, it's different. It's guided by the overarching Jewish value of chocheach tochiach, constructive rebuke from Leviticus. And really, this means there's no perfect company. So attempts to focus only on screening out bad actors or only investing in the best actors really misses a tremendous opportunity to influence corporate leadership. So this means that we engage with every company owned in the JLens portfolio and advocate on issues that are critical and important to the Jewish community.
Great. And can we go a little deeper, Rachel, can you tell us about the methodology JLens uses for scoring companies?
Sure, absolutely. So JLens developed a unique Jewish values scoring methodology based on 6 pillars derived from Judaism's framework of mitzvot obligations. And I'll list them. They are obligation to coexistence, rodef shalom, obligation to society, de machzoro, obligation to the worker, la ta'ashok, obligation to the environment, bal tashchit, obligation to ethical business, nosei v'notem b'emunah, and support for Israel, Yeshuv Eretz Yisrael. Now, each of these pillars is weighted and contains KPIs, key performance indicators. The scores in each pillar then aggregate to company rankings based on our data collection and our direct engagement with companies.
Great. And can you also share a little bit more, Rachel, about what was the process? The Jewish Advocacy Strategy invests in 300 companies. What was the process for selecting those companies?
Right. So portfolio construction. So we began with the universe of the 500 largest US corporations, and each company is then evaluated on the criteria that I described, guided by Jewish values and law, halacha, and then receives a score of metzuyan, excellent, tov, meaning good, treif, not a fit, or lo chashuv, not significant for advocacy in each pillar. Now, JLens then screens out approximately 200 companies based on Jewish values, as well as our annual survey. For example, we screen out tobacco, coal, and for-profit prisons. We also eliminate companies that are deemed not influential or relevant for JLens investor advocacy. The approximately 18 companies that receive a score of Metsuyan, our highest score I mentioned, are overweighted compared to their benchmark weight. Now, we engage and build relationships with each of the 300 companies regularly as part of our research and ranking process. And we also vote proxies on behalf of our investors, really keeping an eye on shareholder resolutions that are really important to the Jewish community.
Great. Thank you very much, Rachel. And I'll add that investors access the Jewish Advocacy Strategy through 2 sub-advisors, Rumline and Parametric, as well as through donor-advised funds at a number of different Jewish community foundations. So I'd like to now introduce Rabbi Josh Ratner. Rabbi Ratner oversees JLens advocacy on behalf of the Jewish community in the corporate and investment arena, and he speaks regularly with companies and with other investors to advance Jewish values and Jewish concerns. Welcome, Rabbi Ratner.
Good afternoon.
So Rabbi Ratner, could you first give us an overview, give us a feel for how big is the corporate social responsibility arena?
Sure. The corporate social responsibility field has grown tremendously in recent years. Today, over 80% of the 500 largest US corporations publish a CSR report. There are thousands of CSR professionals and executives in the space making real significant decisions on a wide range of social and environmental issues.
So how does JLens build relationships with the 300 companies in the Jewish Advocacy Strategy portfolio?
Yeah, we start by reaching out to all 300 companies in our strategy. We feel strongly that developing direct one-on-one relationships with these companies is crucial. We educate them about the Jewish community and our areas of key concern, and encourage them to improve their performance across a range of issues. We also engage with these companies on topics of significance to the Jewish community through coalition work. The socially responsible investing field often brings investors together in coalitions around specific topics or sectors, using the combined clout of multiple investors to move companies who might otherwise be reluctant to change. And finally, I'll share that we use shareholder advocacy to advance Jewish concerns with companies in our strategy. We have filed shareholder proposals on issues such as the opioid crisis, hate speech, and food waste to push companies when traditional engagement fails to move the needle. We've also spoken at company annual meetings in support of corporate management when they face shareholder resolutions intended to pressure them to divest from Israeli operations.
Thank you. And can you give us an example or two of how relationships that JLens has built with a company have made an impact on a particular issue?
Sure. General Mills is a good example I'll share. We've developed a strong relationship with General Mills through several one-to-one calls and other engagements over the past couple of years, even elevating General Mills to our most kosher companies status, which Rachel will speak to a little bit later. Because we know their CSR and investor relations teams so well, when General Mills showed up as one of the targeted companies on the UN Human Rights Council's recent blacklist of companies doing business with Israel, we immediately reached out to them to explain why the blacklist was wrong, why we encouraged General Mills to continue to invest in Israel, and how it could be a resource to them. They were really appreciative of our call, explained the nature of their facility in Israel, and told us that they had us in mind when news of their inclusion in the blacklist first broke. This example shows the importance of having Jewish representation in the CSR arena. When companies like General Mills face a BDS campaign, we want them to think of us first, not of BDS proponents. When situations like a blacklist occur, we really are uniquely situated to represent the Jewish community in the corporate arena. Cisco is another good example I'll share of how our close relationships with the companies in our strategy can really be impactful to our investors. Cisco's been a company we've long held in high regard and also elevated to one of our most kosher companies based on its real robust CSR efforts and significant investments in the Israeli economy. So when Zoom bombing first came to light during the early days of the coronavirus, we reached out to Cisco, which owns the WebEx online video platform, to express our concerns and urge them to take sufficient cybersecurity steps so that WebEx didn't get infected with the type of hateful and anti-Semitic vitriol that happens periodically on Zoom calls. We were able to quickly confirm the security of Cisco's online meeting platform because of our relationship.
Thank you, Rabbi Ratner. And Rachel, I'd like to turn to you. Rabbi Ratner just mentioned the most kosher companies. Can you share a little bit more? How did JLens identify 18 companies to give JLens Most Kosher Companies awards? And can you share a few examples?
Sure. Through all the in-depth research that I mentioned a little earlier and our corporate engagement Rabbi Ratner just discussed, JLens has identified 18 companies that represent excellence and outperform sector peers on a wide array of environmental and social issues through a Jewish lens. Now, these are companies that engage in meaningful coexistence work. Many have strong economic ties to Israel, as well as demonstrate corporate governance and practices that really align with Jewish social and environmental values. We have built strong relationships with each of these companies, and many have joined our session today. JLens Most Kosher US Companies Award has been given to the following 18 companies in 2019: Accenture, Aon, Cisco, Ecolab, General Mills, Hilton, Intel, Kellogg, Kimberly-Clark, Marriott, Merck, Microsoft, Motorola Solutions, NVIDIA, Prologis, Henry Schein, Starbucks, Xcel Energy. Those are our 18 overweighted companies that I mentioned, and more information on these specific companies can be found on our blog. Really, we thank JLEN's Most Kosher Companies for being here virtually today, and congratulate each of you for really your continued commitment as engaged corporate citizens.
Thank you, Rachel, and I'll echo that. We're really pleased to have representatives from those companies joining the call today. We obviously regret that we can't gather in person to award the Most Kosher Company Awards, but we applaud your progress and we look forward to continued engagement. And I'll add that for those interested, 2 of JLEN's Most Kosher Companies, Cisco and Starbucks, will be represented on the panel starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, Business and Investment to Further Peace Building and Coexistence. So Rabbi Ratner, let's turn from the CSR field to the SRI field. You represent the Jewish community also in the socially responsible investing field with other investors. Help us understand the scope and the size of the SRI field and what it looks like and why the Jewish community should have representation.
Sure. The SRI arena is made up of faith-based and values-based investors who create policies and set advocacy agendas. These investors today represent over $30 trillion in assets under management globally, with over $12 trillion in the US alone. The SRI field has grown by 34% globally just since 2016, so it's really huge. Responsible investors convene on a regular basis throughout the year and across the globe on issues directly relevant to Jewish values and Jewish communal concerns.
So how does JLENS engage in the SRI arena?
We represent Jewish concerns at dozens of interfaith and values-based forums annually, and we strengthen relationships with other faith communities by collaborating on shared values. We are, in effect, deploying in the investor arena the traditional Jewish community relations model that has been a cornerstone of Jewish institutions and the political arena for decades. The Jewish community has long understood the need for representation and advocacy in the political arena, building alliances and collaborations, but also speaking with elected officials on issues that uniquely impact the Jewish community. JLENS takes this same community relations model and applies it to the socially responsible investing arena.
Great, thank you. And I really appreciate that metaphor to the Jewish community relations model and the work that the Jewish community already knows how to do and already values in the political arena and bringing that to this new and important arena. And especially that coalition building work. But as you noted, sometimes the Jewish community needs to speak out on issues of unique importance. So can you share some examples of when coalition building hasn't succeeded and you've needed to speak out on issues of unique importance to the Jewish community?
Sure. Yeah, we do sometimes need to speak out against efforts by the SRI field that infringe upon particular Jewish values. So, for example, we successfully engaged the Investor Alliance for Human Rights when its reporting on the tech sector included anti-Israel bias. And we opposed the Business Benchmark for Farm Animal Welfare when its ethical slaughter benchmark punished companies that permitted kosher slaughter. We are the only Jewish investor voice within these coalitions, so we think it's really important that we and the institutions we represent are heard.
Thank you. Rachel, let's talk a bit about research. JLENS is the only organization scoring companies with a unique lens of Jewish values. Did you try using other standardized or off-the-shelf research, and what happened?
Yes, that's right, Rabbi Siegel. Along with the growth in this field, the over 30 trillion AUM globally that Rabbi Ratner just mentioned, has really come an extensive demand for research on corporations and their ESG, environmental social governance practices. Now, most investors do not have the capacity to develop sophisticated internal research on each corporation in which they invest. ESG research providers are often seen as trusted partners, and investors representing trillions of dollars rely on research providers' scoring of companies to make investment decisions. This is important. So we at JLENS did a thorough review of 5 different ESG research firms to consider which one to perhaps supplement our own research. Unfortunately, we found a significant gap in values alignment with Jewish communal concerns. Now, this was certainly true about Israel. There was an unexpected and significant amount of anti-Israel bias in the human rights and social scoring areas of corporate profiles, really across all the research firms. So some of them were more than others, but also this was more than just about Israel. We really wanted to focus our research at JLENS on a unique Jewish values lens across the board. So We developed an in-house methodology, as I described, to score and rank companies through a Jewish lens.
Great, and in fact, you did some recent advocacy with Sustainalytics, one of the more egregious examples of bias in ESG research. Can you tell us more about that? How did that go?
We did, Rabbi Siegel. Yes. So out of all the research firms JLens reviewed, Sustainalytics, which is a Dutch-based socially responsible investment research and ratings company, really manifested the most anti-Israel bias in the reporting. Their research ranks Israel as disproportionately controversial compared to other conflict regions, relies on politicized news sources, and singles Israel out for unique harsh treatment and scoring. Morningstar, many of us are familiar, a US-based public company that provides analysis tools to investors, announced their acquisition of Sustainalytics last month. So we reached out to Morningstar, and we are pleased to report that they have agreed to address our anti-Israel bias concerns once the merger closes.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about the coronavirus pandemic. Rabbi Ratner, how has JLens advocacy with companies shifted in response to the coronavirus pandemic? Has advocacy taken a back seat?
Great question, Jacob. Actually, I'd argue that advocacy is even more vital than ever. There's a lot of great work in the field right now, which we're pleased to take part in addressing the coronavirus. This focuses on how businesses are caring for their workforce, including compensation and paid sick leave, as well as addressing the crisis from a sustainability perspective. At the same time, we have some initiatives that predate the pandemic that we are really looking forward to launching this year. One exciting example I can share is an investor campaign around religious coexistence in the workplace that we plan to roll out soon.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll turn to some Q&A from our network. So this is a question for Rabbi Ratner. Are some companies more receptive than others? What do you do to engage them?
Great question. Yes, definitely. Some companies, when we coordinate a call, have multiple leaders participating from various departments. They have done their homework on JLens and have questions for us about our strategy, and they're really eager to engage. Other times, it's a struggle to even get an initial connection. This definitely impacts our scoring of the companies. We want companies to be responsive to investor advocacy from the Jewish community. We also have tools to escalate the conversation, as I mentioned earlier, including working in coalition with other investors, creating an investor letter engagement effort, or ultimately filing a shareholder resolution to get the company to engage.
Great, and a follow-up question, who do you speak with at companies? Is it investor relations? Are there CSR staff? Is it others? Who do you connect with?
It depends somewhat on the company and how robust their CSR sort of structure is. We strive to have at least someone from the CSR community, if assuming they have someone. Often investor relations also joins the call. And then it can be a range of people from operations to safety and security to procurement sometimes when it comes to renewable energy issues or things like that. So it's a variety.
Great, thank you. So there's a question, do you only work with US companies or with Canadian companies too? I'll mention that the Jewish Advocacy Strategy invests in US companies. It follows the index of large cap US companies, but JLens, we find ourselves, as Rabbi Ratner mentioned, throughout the socially responsible investing arena, often being the only, almost always being the only Jewish voice representing the Jewish community and Jewish communal concerns. So we are often called on to speak, to do advocacy in Canada, in Europe, especially where this field is much farther along than the United States. So the next question is, investing with Jewish values seems so obvious. Why has the Jewish community taken so long to get engaged? I'll turn that over to Rachel first, if that's all right, and then maybe I'll follow up.
Sure, thanks, Rabbi Siegel. It's a great question. We discussed earlier how the field really began with this focus on negative screening and sin stocks. And as the social responsible investing field has really grown exponentially and has evolved more towards positive impact and engagement, that's much more in line with Jewish values, the hocheach tochiach, constructive rebuke principle, really more compatible with the Jewish lens. And secondly, it's really a matter of community organizing in the Jewish community. Institutions take time to change. And, but I think the Jewish community is really becoming much more aware, in part, I'd like to say because of our advocacy about this field, its popularity. More and more people are interested in investing with their values, young people, women, other key stakeholders, and Jewish institutions are really starting to realize that this is an important opportunity.
Great, and I'll add that also that's the goal of this summit, to advance Jewish leadership in the responsible investing arena, to further the conversation within the Jewish community, to move the conversation from the why of Jewish values aligned impact or responsible investing to the how. So thank you all for joining us. We will now transition to our next session with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Thank you.